Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the 21-Day Transformation Challenge. Today, we are conquering all of your fears. But to conquer them, we first need to identify what they even are. So, if you are someone who is not completely aware of what all your fears are, but you realize that some of them may be impeding your chances of success, then this is the right video for you. So, everyone, welcome back to the 21-Day Challenge. If you have not seen the other videos, I will add the link right here so that you can go through the rest of the playlist. We are on day 6. That's a lie. We're on day 5. We're on day 5, and today is all about fears, fear identification, conquering fears, and kind of figuring out how we do that really tough piece in the middle of figuring out our fears and conquering them so that we can go into growing into our highest selves, into our best selves. And that way, when we set those goals in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to achieve them and bring them into fruition without your fears and your inner doubts taking over. So, in the past few days, we've talked about self doubt. We've talked about your external environment, doing an audit of it to make sure that you're surrounded by positive energy, making sure that you are talking to yourself with kindness and love, and how to create your own affirmations that are attuned just for you. Those were in days 1 and 2. So if you need to go back, pause this video. I will wait. I'm a lovely, patient person. That's completely not true. I am actually not an extremely patient person, but I am working on myself. Okay. I'm working on it. So let's talk about fears. We're going to talk about the two main types of fears that all of us deal with, including myself. So you are not alone in this: the fear of success and the fear of failure. A lot of us really focus on the fear of failure. So let's go into that first. How do you even identify if you have a fear of failure? Easiest way, if you feel like you're about to do something and you start getting nervous, you start getting a little anxious, and you're picturing and feeling the emotions of a worst case scenario, that is a fear of failure. You are sitting there, let's say, I don't know, you're applying for a brand new job. You've been looking for a job for a while. You have an interview at a place that you're really excited to potentially work at, and you start getting nervous about the interview and you're afraid that you're going to fail at the interview. And so you build up this entire creation in your head and you start thinking, like, oh, I'm going to go into the interview. I'm going to do badly at this, and they're going to hate that, and they're going to be upset with me, or they're not going to like me. They're going to laugh at me for thinking that I deserve this position. But it's not that you are imagining the worst case scenario, it's that you are putting yourself in the feeling state of that worst case scenario. And if you've ever done any manifestation techniques or tools or classes, they always tell you that the emotion is way more important than what you're seeing in your mind. The emotion is what makes it real for your body. Your brain cannot tell the difference between something that you imagine versus reality when it comes to your subconscious mind. So it is so important that if you are looking at and trying to prep for a worst case scenario, that you keep your emotions out of it. So how do we do that? We need to look carefully at what those emotions are trying to tell us and how long term those emotions may be. For instance, if you go to get a shot and you're nervous about getting a shot because you know it's going to hurt, your brain can now rationalize the fact that it's not going to hurt for very long. Some of us struggle to get through that, which is why a fear of shots is somewhat considered an irrational fear, because you know it's going to hurt for like a minute or two. You might be sore for a day if you get a flu shot and then it passes. But when we think about worst case scenarios for things that have never happened to us before, we don't understand when that emotion will stop and when our lives will resume. So let's go back to that example of you applying for a job and you're nervous about the interview. Now, when you're nervous about the interview, that's completely understandable. One thing that you can do is definitely put in the amount of work and be your best self for prepping, because that's going to be one way to get rid of that fear of failure. A lot of us have a fear of failure because we don't feel like we deserve what we're actually trying to go for. And that is usually very far from the truth, especially for people of color and definitely for women. Okay. Now, let's say that that's not your case. Let's say that you are just nervous about it because it's a big opportunity for you, but you start to be afraid that you're going to fail. Let's look at what actually may happen that's realistically an option for you. You go into that interview and they ask you a question that you are not prepared for, and you freeze up and you feel like you're not going to get the job. Let's say that you don't. That's completely possible, and that is your worst case scenario, and it's completely rational. But what would happen if you really didn't get that job? Would you never work again? Probably not. You probably get another job. Would you feel sad for a day, a week, a year? Most likely somewhere between a day and a week. Worst case scenario, you're going to be emotionally down, possibly slightly distraught for about a week. You may feel uncomfortable for 1 day to a week. But all of us have gone through something in life where we feel uncomfortable for 1 day to a week before. And this is a worst case scenario. And it's important to prep for those. That's completely understandable. As one of our past presidents says, trust but verify. There's nothing wrong with the verification. What's wrong is when that verification pulls you completely out of the present and puts you into this situation, preparing your heart and mind for something that has not happened and confusing your brain and most likely helping bring it into fruition itself. So the next time that you are going through something and you notice that you have a fear of failure, let's talk about why you have that fear. Do you feel like you didn't prepare properly? Are you concerned about external factors such as how people are going to view you, how they're going to feel about you? Or is it just a matter of you trying to protect yourself and your heart and your peace? None of those are unnatural and nothing is wrong with any of those, but there are different techniques to work through each and every one. If you are if you aren't preparing properly, how can you do that in the next few days before that interview comes up? How can you make sure that you are in the best place? Because one thing that that's going to help you do, if that's your problem, then you will know at your deepest core that if you don't get that job because you did your best, that it wasn't meant for you, and that that's okay, and you will mourn and move forward. On the second one, if you just feel like there's going to be shame attached to it, that shame is probably rooted in another time that you failed at something and someone made you feel uncomfortable or negative and it put you in a bad place. But it's not really that job opportunity that's causing that fear of failure. It's a past trauma that you still need to work through. And so we're going to cover that in another video. So we're going to come back to that another day. But the third one is just that you're just nervous. You're just naturally nervous and you're like spiraling. So bring yourself back out of that spiral. Let yourself know that even if the worst case scenario does come, this is the plan I have in place to work through that. If I failed at this interview, I'm going to treat myself to this afterward, or I'm going to go to the gym and get my energy back up. But I'm going to always get back on that horse. Please do not let the fear of failure stand in your way of success because failure is the only way to get to success. Everyone has failed at something, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with failure. Failure is how you grow, and it should be expected and anticipated before you reach success. If you make it to success without any failures, you are the exception. You are not the rule. And I'm so happy for you because you got the best angels. Okay. But the rest of us have to go through a few failures before we get to success. The problem is we don't actually handle those failures with grace and let ourselves grow from those experiences. So let's go back to the last case scenario of that. You go through the interview, you do poorly, you feel ashamed, you feel sad. But what you do next is really what's going to define you and define your life as a whole. If you leave that experience and you never apply for a job again, you never do another interview, your life is going to be on a very different trajectory because the next interview might be the one that is successful for you. What you could do in that negative situation is take the feedback from those people when they say, oh, this isn't the position for you. Ask them why they felt that way and what areas you can strengthen yourself in. And that will not also, it gives you feedback, but it also shows them how dedicated you are. And you never know, they might hit you up the next time another job is available. I've seen it happen. As a manager, I've seen this happen. This is something that I also do. How people deal with failure tells me a lot about who they are, and it changes my perspective on who I want to hire in the future, especially the people that take it with grace and understand that there are areas that you can grow in. Just saying. Anyway, let's move on to having a fear of success. This is one that I personally struggle with, and I find that this is a lot harder to work through because it's not that fear that you aren't good enough. It's the fear that of overwhelm, the fear that you will not be able to handle all the blessings coming your way, which is so valid. It's so valid. As someone who has been somewhat successful in their career, there are definitely days I get overwhelmed and I feel like I get to a point where I have a fear that if I am successful in the way I want to be successful, I'll never rest again. Completely false. I'm sure Beyonce takes naps every once in a while. Everyone, if you build the system for yourself correctly, then you will have rest. So you also need to do this manifestation exercise of figuring out what your best case scenario is. But let's say that your best case scenario isn't really what you expected it to be. How would you build systems to support yourself going through that? The best way to deal with any type of fear is to have a plan for it and to recognize the root of it. We recognize the root for fear of failure. So, what is the fear of success rooted in? What do you think is going to happen when you reach success? What do you think internally about successful people? Similar to the whole conversation about money, if you've ever read any like wealth books or financial literacy books, they always tell you have to work on your money psychology. Or if you read the books, The Psychology of Money, that covers everything. That's probably the quickest one for you to get through this. But they tell you if you have negative views about people with money, it's very hard for you to become someone with money because your subconscious is always going through this narrative of what those people are really like. If someone says, define a wealthy person to me, tell me your personal trait, boom, go. And you say, oh, rich people are mean, rich people are snobby, um, they never get their money in the right ways, they're always screwing someone over. Yeah, you're never going to be wealthy because why would, if you're a good person and you think rich people are bad people, you're never going to get there. So if you have this vision of the person you want to be and what success looks like, but other people have achieved those successes and you don't like what their life looks like, then yeah, you're probably not going to get there because you're subconsciously sabotaging yourself because that's not the person you want to be. Which makes sense because you think they're horrible people in some way or another. You have a negative viewpoint of them. So why would you want to start working towards that? Even if you consciously think that's what you want to start working towards, your body and your subconscious mind is more powerful than your conscious mind, and it's going to stand in your way. So, if you have a fear of success, what is your fear of success rooted in? Is it something that you've seen someone else successful have? Is it something that you've noticed? Is it something that you've been told your entire life by other people or people that you look up to? Or is it just someone that's been saying stuff so consistently that it's like a commercial and you just take it in? Because some of us deal with those as well. You're surrounded by that negativity. It's going to be very hard for you to be successful. And that's what we talked about in your environment audit. If you need to go back to that video, I'll add the link down below. Removing those negative outliers, because that's usually where your fear of success is going to come from. The fear of failure is very much internally rooted. And that's why I encourage you to watch day 2, because that's when we talk about your internal audit, basically. And then day 3, we talked about your external audit, which is usually where the fear of success is rooted in. Honestly, guys, I cannot emphasize how much and how important it is to work on your mindset and your self concept and your self view. These are two of the biggest fears. And honestly, most fears do boil down to being in one of those two buckets. But it's usually not just about you. It's about things that you're seeing, it's what you're being told, it's what you're hearing in the news. And all of those things are just distractions. You are the only you on this planet, and only you know what you are and are not capable of. And you actually would be surprised what you actually are capable of. Please, please do that audit. Even though it's brutal sometimes, it makes you think about things that make you uncomfortable. But if you can figure out the root of your fears, you can pull it out. The only way you will be able to get over the things that scare you is if you really understand why they scare you. And it's usually not the first reason you think it is. Because a lot of us think things are surface level, and then we look deeper and we realize, oh, this is much more deeply rooted than I thought it was. This is something my mom had been saying for years, or this is something my grandmother has been saying for years. And I saw it in person. I've seen these people be horrible people, even though they have what I want. And it's hard to separate that difference. And even if you have only seen the negative, then be the positive change. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the first person to change that narrative. Even if everyone else, let's say every billionaire currently on the planet potentially was a horrible person, be the change. Be the one that makes the difference in the world and sets us up in a new trajectory for success because we could use it. These are the times where we could use you being your best self and achieving all that you want to achieve because there is a reason that you want to achieve it. If you have something on your heart that you feel like you are called to do not ignore that calling. And if you push it off, I promise you that calling is going to get louder. It's going to get louder. It's never going to shut up. Because as much as you try to push it down, it's going to keep pushing back at you. So you might as well conquer that fear today and do it now versus waiting till 2035 or 2045. We aren't going anywhere and we are here to help you. And that's why we have built this community here on TikTok. There are so many places that you can find like minded people that are trying to work on themselves that you can leverage. And they want to be leveraged. They want to help you. They want to be helped. They want a sounding board, a partner, someone to work with their life through. And that's the benefit of having these communities, what we're building online. And we're so blessed to have this opportunity of even having the internet because everyone before us had to try to figure it out on their own or with their small communities that they had access to. We are one of the first generations to have access to everybody. Like almost everybody on the planet is online. And that means there is probably someone out there that has either gone through what you've gone through, conquered it, or at least knows how to help you in some way or another. So leverage those people. You never know what may come of it. And I will see you guys for tomorrow's video. Bye.